In the 1980s, the World Wrestling Federation was an unstoppable pop culture juggernaut. It was an era built on larger-than-life superheroes with impossible physiques. But behind the pyrotechnics, neon gear, and screaming arenas lay a dangerous secret that almost brought the entire empire crashing down. In 1993, the federal government came after WWF owner Vince McMahon with everything they had. The charges: federal drug conspiracy and distribution of anabolic steroids. If convicted, McMahon faced up to 11 years in prison, massive fines, and the guaranteed collapse of his wrestling machine. Season 3, Episode 14 of Dark Side of the Ring, titled The Steroid Trials, takes us inside the darkest, most high-stakes legal battle in professional wrestling history. This isn't just a story about drugs in sports. It's a story about power, loyalty, a federal prosecution out for blood, and the trial that almost ended WWE forever. To understand how Vince McMahon wound up in a federal courtroom, you first have to understand the culture he built. When Vince took over the WWF from his father in the early 1980s, he didn't just want traditional pro wrestling, he wanted spectacle. And to Vince, spectacle meant size. If you were 6'4" and 290 pounds with bulging veins, you got the main event push. If you were smaller, regardless of how talented you were in the ring, you were often relegated to the opening matches. Anabolic steroids became the open secret of the industry. As former wrestlers in the episode recall, taking performance-enhancing drugs wasn't just tolerated. It felt like a mandatory job requirement if you wanted to stay at the top of the card and survive the grueling 300-day-a-year road schedule. Enter Dr. George Zahorian. A licensed physician in Pennsylvania, Dr. Zahorian frequently served as the ringside doctor for WWF events in Hershey. But behind the scenes, Zahorian was essentially acting as a primary distributor, shipping vast quantities of anabolic steroids and painkillers directly to WWF performers, including Vince McMahon himself. In 1990, the federal government caught up with Dr. Zahorian. He was indicted and later convicted for illegal drug distribution. But for federal prosecutors, Zahorian was just a stepping stone. They didn't just want a local doctor, they wanted the kingpin who sat at the head of the billion-dollar WWF table, Vince McMahon. The feds launched a massive investigation aimed directly at McMahon and Titan Sports. Their core argument: Vince wasn't just aware of the steroid use. He was actively conspiring with Zahorian to distribute steroids to his wrestlers to maintain that trademark WWF look. By late 1993, the federal government officially indicted Vince McMahon. The stakes could not have been higher. Vince knew he was facing real jail time. He was so convinced he might go to prison that he secretly named Jerry, the King, Lawler as the man to run creative operations for the WWF if he were locked up. The company began scaling down, cutting costs, and bracing for impact. July 1994. The trial commenced in Brooklyn, New York. Vince McMahon famously arrived at the courthouse wearing a neck brace following recent spinal surgery, a visual that his lead defense attorney, the formidable Jerry McDevitt, insisted was genuine, though critics viewed it as a calculated play for sympathy. The prosecution brought out wrestler after wrestler to testify. Former performers took the stand detailing how they obtained steroids, but many couldn't definitively tie Vince McMahon to ordering them to use drugs. The entire prosecution hinged on one man, Terry Bollea, better known to the world as Hulk Hogan. Hogan was the face of the company, the global icon who had spent a decade telling kids to say your prayers and eat your vitamins. The prosecution believed Hogan's testimony would deliver the death blow to McMahon's defense. On July 14, 1994, Hogan took the stand. The media circus was insane. Under oath, Hogan admitted to taking steroids for nearly 14 years to recover from injuries and keep his physique main event ready. He admitted that Vince McMahon had occasionally received steroid packages alongside him at WWF headquarters. Then came the million-dollar question: did Vince McMahon ever order him to take steroids? Hogan looked at the jury and said, no. Hogan testified that while Vince knew about the usage, McMahon never directly instructed or forced him to use performance-enhancing drugs. In an instant, the prosecution's star witness had completely gutted their conspiracy argument. Jerry McDevitt and the defense team seized the moment. They argued that the government was conducting a high-profile witch hunt against a celebrity CEO, trying to hold McMahon criminally responsible for the personal choices of independent contractor athletes. After 16 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: not guilty on all counts. Vince McMahon walked out of the courtroom a free man, but the wrestling business was forever altered. The trial cost Titan Sports millions in legal fees, brought intense federal oversight, and shattered the illusion of wrestling heroism for millions of fans. In the immediate aftermath, WWF instituted strict drug testing policies, forcing a shift away from the massive steroid-fueled physiques of the 80s and paving the way for smaller, more athletic stars like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels to take the lead. Dark Side of the Ring presents the steroid trials not just as a legal thriller, but as a turning point in sports entertainment history. It showed a ruthless, determined Vince McMahon at his most vulnerable, backed into a corner by the US government, yet somehow coming out victorious. Had the verdict gone the other way, modern pop culture look wildly different today. There would be no Attitude Era, no Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and no global corporate juggernaut as we know it. Vince McMahon beat the feds in 1994. But as this episode reminds us, the shadow of that trial remained cast over the wrestling industry for decades to come.